The Grand Assembly Hall floated in the darkness of space like a massive crystal flower. Inside its transparent walls, hundreds of alien beings gathered in a chamber so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. This was the heart of galactic civilization, where 847 species came together to make decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of star systems. Haiyan walked through the entrance corridor with steady steps. His black diplomatic suit looked plain compared to the shimmering robes and exotic armor worn by the alien delegates around him. Behind him walked Jiwan, her military uniform crisp and formal, and Minho, who carried a data tablet and couldn't stop staring at the bizarre creatures passing by. "Remember what we discussed?" Haiyan said quietly. "Let them think we're impressed. Let them think we're small." Guan's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Minho just kept walking, his eyes recording everything with the camera implants Earth's intelligence. Service had given him. They entered the main chamber, and sound washed over them like a wave. Thousands of voices speaking in hundreds of languages, all translated by the automatic systems built into the hall. The chamber was circular, with seating arranged in concentric rings that rose toward the distant ceiling. At the center stood a platform where speakers would address the council. A tall creature with purple skin and 4 arms gestured for them to follow. It led the human delegation to a small section near the back, far from the center of power. The seats were designed for beings much larger than humans, forcing them to climb up awkwardly. "They put us with the other minor species," Guan muttered as she settled into the oversized chair. Haiyan looked around at their neighbors, small furry creatures that chittered nervously. A floating gas being contained in a crystalline sphere. Insectoid beings with too many legs. All of them were from weak species, civilizations that had been absorbed into the Council's protection, whether they wanted it or not. A deep sound echoed through the chamber, like a bell made of thunder. The assembled aliens fell silent. From the highest tier, a massive figure rose. Vexthor, overlord of the Thalrix Empire and current head of the Council. His species looked almost reptilian, with scales that shimmered between green and gold. He stood 4 meters tall, and his voice carried authority earned over 3,000 years of life. "We gather to welcome a new species to our great civilization," Vexthor announced. "The humans of planet Earth have been observed and evaluated. We find them suitable for admission under standard protectorate terms." Polite sounds of approval rippled through the chamber. This was routine. Every few cycles, a new species was discovered and brought into the fold. The strong protected the weak. That was how the galaxy worked. "The human delegation may approach," Vexthor commanded. Haiyan stood and walked down the long ramp to the central platform. Each step took him past rows of alien beings who watched with curiosity or indifference. Some looked at him the way a person might look at an interesting insect. Others didn't bother looking at all. When he reached the platform, a holographic document appeared in the air before him. The contract was written in Earth's languages, translated perfectly by Council systems. Haiyan read it slowly, while the entire chamber waited. The terms were clear. Earth would become a protectorate of the Thalrix Empire for 500 standard years. During this time, the Thalrix would provide protection and guidance. In return, Earth would provide resources as requested. Young humans would serve in the Council's military forces as needed. Human culture would be modified to align with galactic standards. Trade would be conducted through approved channels. Independent space travel beyond Earth's system would require permission. "These are generous terms," Vexthor said after several minutes of silence. "Your species is young and lacks the wisdom to navigate galactic politics alone. We offer you safety and prosperity." Haiyan looked up from the document. His face was calm, but Jiwan knew him well enough to recognize the anger burning behind his eyes. "And if we refuse these terms?" Haiyan asked. The chamber erupted in noise. Clicking, chittering, buzzing, and sounds no human throat could make. The translation system struggled to keep up, but the meaning was clear. The aliens were laughing. Vexthor's expression didn't change, but his tone carried amusement. "Refuse? No species refuses. Human. This is how newcomers join our civilization." Every being in this chamber accepted similar terms when their species was young. You didn't answer my question, Hyenwu said. What happens if we refuse? The laughter died down. Vexter leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human. Then Earth would be designated a rogue element. For the safety of the galaxy, rogue elements must be pacified. Your world would be placed under direct military occupation until your species learns to accept reality. I see, Hyenwu said. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many aliens as he could. So our choices are surrender or conquest. Your choices are cooperation or correction, Vexler replied. These are the only paths available to a species as primitive as yours. Hyenwu stood silent for a long moment. The chamber waited. Finally, he spoke 5 words that would echo across the galaxy. Then humanity declares war on you. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the automatic translation system seemed to pause, uncertain if they had processed the words correctly. Then chaos erupted. Aliens leaped to their feet, their voices rising in shock and outrage. Some laughed even harder than before. Others looked confused, as if Hyenwu had spoken in a language the translators couldn't handle. Vexter raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent again. You declare war? On the entire Galactic Council? His voice carried disbelief. Human, do you understand what you're saying? We have fleets that number in the tens of thousands. We have weapons that can shatter planets. We have fought wars for millions of years. Understand perfectly, Hyenwu replied. His voice was steady, showing no fear. You've given us 2 choices. Become your slaves or fight for our freedom. We choose to fight. This is madness, said another council member, a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking glass. Your species has barely left its own planet. You have no concept of the forces arrayed against you. Hyenwu turned to face the crystalline speaker. We know exactly what we're facing. We've been watching you for decades. We've studied your ships, your tactics, your technologies. We know your strengths. He paused. And we know your weaknesses. Giwan stood and walked down to join Hyenwu on the platform. She activated a portable holographic projector. Images filled the air above them. Detailed schematics of Council warships, fleet deployment patterns, communication protocols, strategic resources and supply lines, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain, the murmuring. And the chamber took on a different tone, confusion, nervousness. Some species representatives were staring at the images with obvious alarm. Recognizing classified military intelligence about their own forces, Minho joined them next, adding his own data to the display. While you saw us as primitives, we were learning, he explained. Every transmission you sent, every ship that passed through our system, every piece of technology we could observe, we absorbed it all, and we improved on it. Vexer's scales darkened, a sign of anger in his species. Impossible. You lack the scientific foundation to understand our technology. We lack your complacency, Hyenwu corrected. You've been the dominant powers for so long that you stopped innovating. Your weapons are millions of years old. Your tactics haven't changed in eons. You fight wars of conquest where both sides use the same technologies and strategies. It's become a game with rules you all understand. And what do you know of war? Demanded a military commander from the front rows. Hyenwu's expression hardened. Everything. Humans have been fighting wars since we learned to pick up stones. We've spent our entire history in conflict. We know war in ways you've forgotten. We fight not for territory or dominance. We fight for survival, and there is nothing more dangerous than a species fighting for its existence. Vexler stood to his full height. You cannot win. This is a certainty. Perhaps, Hyenwu acknowledged. But we can make the cost unbearable. We can ensure that conquering Earth costs you more than you're willing to pay. And if we fall, we'll make certain that the galaxy remembers us as the species that refused to kneel. He deactivated the holographic display and looked directly at Vexler. You have 72 standard hours to withdraw all claims on human space. After that, any council ship that enters our system will be considered an act of war and destroyed. The chamber erupted again, but Hyeon-woo was already walking away. Ji-won and Min-ho followed him back up the ramp, past rows of shocked and angry aliens. As they reached the exit, Hyeon-woo heard Vexther's voice boom across the chamber. The council votes on authorizing military action against the human species. All in favor? The response was unanimous. 847 species voted yes. Outside the chamber, Min-ho was shaking. We really did it. We just declared war on the entire galaxy, No Hyeon-woo said as they walked back to their ship. We declared that we won't be slaves. There's a difference. Guan checked her communicator. Earth Command is asking if we succeeded in the mission. Hyeon-woo thought about the question. Their mission had been to negotiate the best terms possible for Earth's integration into galactic society. Instead, they had just started the largest war in human history. Tell them, he said slowly, that humanity is united. Every nation, every person, every resource. For the first time in our history, we stand together. Not because we agree on everything, but because we agree on one thing. We will be free, or we will be dead. There is no third option. The message was sent. 70 light-years away, Earth began preparing for war. Hyeon-woo did not sit down after his declaration. The council chamber remained in chaos, with representatives shouting in hundreds of languages, while translation systems worked frantically to keep up. But the human ambassador stood perfectly still on the central platform. Waiting for the noise to fade, Vexther gestured sharply and the chamber's sound dampeners activated, forcing silence across the assembled aliens. Human, you have made your statement. You may leave now while the council discusses your fate. I'm not finished, Hyeon-woo replied calmly. Several council members hissed or made their species equivalent of laughter. The audacity of this primitive creature continued to amuse and insult them in equal measure. Very well, Vexther said with exaggerated patience. What else do you wish to say before you depart to your doomed world? Hyeon-woo nodded to Ji-won, who activated another series of holographic displays. This time the images were more detailed, more specific. Fleet compositions for the Thalrix Empire's home defense forces. Supply depot locations for the Krill Dominion. Communication encryption keys for the Ventari Collective. Personnel files for high-ranking military officers across a dozen species. The chamber's atmosphere changed instantly. The amusement vanished, replaced by alarm and anger. Species representatives recognized information about their own militaries. Data that was supposed to be protected by the most sophisticated security systems in the galaxy. Where did you obtain this information? Demanded a Krill commander, its tentacles writhing in agitation. These files are classified at the highest levels. We told you, Min-ho said, stepping forward. We've been watching. Your communication networks are sophisticated, but they follow predictable patterns. Your security is designed to prevent other council species from spying on you. It never occurred to you that a non-member species might be listening. A Ventari delegate, resembling a large bird with metallic feathers, stood abruptly. This is an act of espionage. This alone justifies immediate military response. You were already planning military response, Hyeon-woo pointed out. You voted for it 30 seconds ago? We're simply explaining why your military response will fail. Kermith rose from his seat near the front of the chamber. The crystalline being served as the Council's chief military strategist, a position he had held for over 2,000 years. His body refracted light in complex patterns, a sign that he was analyzing the situation carefully. I will acknowledge that you have gathered impressive intelligence, Kermith said, his voice like wind chimes made of ice. But intelligence does not win wars. Technology wins wars. Industry wins wars. Experience wins wars. In all these areas, you are hopelessly outmatched. Are we? Hyeon-woo asked. He nodded to Min-ho again. The holographic display shifted to show technical specifications, weapon systems, propulsion designs, shield configurations. But these weren't council technologies. These were human innovations, and they were fundamentally different from anything the council used. Your weapons are almost entirely energy-based, Min-ho explained, his voice taking on the enthusiasm of a scientist discussing his work. plasma cannons, particle beams, directed energy systems. They're effective and you've refined them over millions of years. But they all require tremendous power generation, and they're limited by heat dissipation. Your ships are essentially giant batteries with weapons attached. He brought up a schematic of a human warship. It looked crude compared to the elegant council vessels, but there was something menacing about its angular design. Humans use kinetic weapons, railguns that fire projectiles at relativistic speeds, missiles with nuclear and antimatter warheads. These require less power and generate less heat. We can sustain fire longer than you can. Our ships are smaller, faster, and harder to hit. Thalric's admiral laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Kinetic weapons are primitive. We abandoned such things 1,000,000 years ago. Our shields will stop your crude projectiles easily. Your shields are calibrated for energy weapons, Guan interjected. They're designed to disperse heat and deflect particle streams. A solid object moving at a significant fraction of light speed will punch through them like they're not there. You've optimized your defenses for the wrong threat. Kermith's light patterns flickered rapidly, the crystalline equivalent of frowning. Even if your weapons are effective, you lack the industrial capacity to challenge us. We have shipyards and 1,000 systems. We can produce warships faster than you can count them. Hien Wu smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. You're right that you can produce ships faster than we can. But can you produce them faster than we can destroy them? He gestured, and the holographic display changed again. This time, it showed Earth's solar system, specifically the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The image zoomed in to reveal massive structures hidden among the rocks. Automated manufacturing facilities, Hien Wu explained. Self-replicating construction systems that use asteroid materials to build more facilities and more ships. We call them von Neumann factories, named after a human mathematician. Each facility can produce 10 more facilities and 100 warships before moving to a new asteroid. The process is exponential. The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Exponential growth was something every species understood and every species feared. It was the reason organic populations were carefully controlled, the reason certain technologies were banned. Exponential processes could spiral out of control quickly. How long have these facilities been operating? Asked a Ventari scientist, her voice tight with concern. Long enough, Giwan answered. By the time your fleets arrive at Earth, we'll have more ships than you do. And they'll keep coming, faster than you can destroy them. Vexter slammed one massive fist on his seat's armrest, creating a boom that echoed through the chamber. You speak of technology and tactics as if they matter. You forget the most important factor: experience. The Council has fought wars across the galaxy for millions of years. We have combat veterans who have lived longer than your entire civilization. What do you know of real warfare? The question hung in the air. Hien Wu was quiet for a moment before answering. You want to know what we know of war? He asked softly. Let me tell you about humanity. We are a species that covers almost every habitable part of our planet. We speak thousands of languages. We follow hundreds of religions. We're divided into nearly 200 nations, each with its own culture, history, and interests. He paused, looking around the chamber. For our entire recorded history, we have been at war with each other. Not occasionally, constantly. There has not been a single year in human history. When humans were not killing other humans somewhere on our world, we have fought over land, resources, ideologies, religions, and things so trivial that future generations couldn't understand what the conflict was about. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The species around them were generally unified. Once a species reached a certain level of development, they typically achieved global unity. Internal conflict was seen as a mark of primitive civilization. We know war in ways you cannot imagine, Hien Wu continued. We know guerrilla warfare and total war. We know siege tactics and blitzkrieg. We know propaganda and psychological operations. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and arrows, with rifles and artillery, with tanks and aircraft, with nuclear weapons and bioweapons, Every generation of humans has refined the art of killing other humans. Kermith's light patterns showed skepticism. Fighting among yourselves is not the same as fighting the Council. You battle over cities and territories. We fight across star systems. The scale is incomparable. The scale is different, Hien-Wu agreed. But the principles are the same. And here's what you don't understand. You fight wars of conquest. You fight to expand territory, to gain resources, to demonstrate power. These are limited wars with limited objectives. You know when to stop. You know when the cost exceeds the benefit. His voice grew harder. Humans don't fight that kind of war anymore. Not when our survival is at stake. When we fight existential wars, we fight total wars. We dedicate every resource, every person, every technological innovation to the conflict. We accept any sacrifice, pay any price, inflict any horror to ensure our survival. He pulled up historical images from Earth, cities destroyed by warfare, entire populations mobilized for conflict, weapons of devastating power. This is what we did to each other, he said. Imagine what we'll do to you. The chamber was silent now. The council members were beginning to understand that they might have mad. A serious miscalculation. This species was not like the others they had absorbed. Those species had accepted council protection because they wanted peace, stability, safety. Humans seemed to prefer freedom over safety, even if freedom meant war. There's something else you should know, Minho added. Until we detected the council's existence 50 years ago, humanity was deeply divided. We were on the brink of our own self-destruction. Nuclear weapons were pointed at our own cities. Climate change threatened our environment. Political ideologies clashed violently, smiled slightly. Then we found you. We discovered that we weren't alone in the universe, and that the aliens we found expected us to surrender our sovereignty. Do you know what happened? Every nation on Earth put aside its differences. Every conflict was suspended. Every resource was redirected. In 50 years, we achieved technological advances that should have taken 500 years, because we finally had something more important than our disagreements. We had a common enemy. You united because of us? Vexter asked. You gave us purpose? Hien-Wu confirmed. You gave us direction? You gave us a reason to become more than we were. So in a way, we should thank you. Without the threat of the Council, humanity might have destroyed itself. Instead, we're stronger than we've ever been. And we're going to use that strength to ensure that Earth remains free. A small alien from one of the minor species spoke up, its voice barely audible over the translation system. Why not just accept protectorate status? In time, you could gain independence. Many species have followed this path. Why choose war? Hien-Wu turned to face the small alien. Because once you kneel, you may never stand again. Because once you accept someone else's authority over your life, you've lost something precious. We've studied the species that accepted protectorate status. They're still protectorates, some for thousands of years. They tell themselves they're building toward independence, but that day never comes. The Council always finds reasons to extend the terms. We govern for the good of all, Vexter insisted. You govern for your own good, Jiwan countered. You extract resources from minor species. You conscript their populations for your wars. You suppress their cultures and technologies to prevent competition. This isn't protection. It's exploitation with a friendly name. The Thalric's overlord's scales darkened further. Enough. You have said your piece. The Council will now deliberate on the appropriate response to your provocation. You will wait outside. You won't be waiting, Hien-Wu said. We're returning to Earth. You have 72 hours to withdraw your claims. After that, we consider ourselves at war, and any Council vessel in human space will be destroyed without warning. It'll be destroyed, Vexer growled. Your world will be conquered, your population subjugated, and your species will learn humility. Hien-Wu met his gaze without flinching. Maybe, but you'll pay a price for it that will haunt the Council for the rest of its existence. And every other species watching this will know that there was one species that chose to fight rather than submit. Will become a symbol, an inspiration. And you'll never be able to control the galaxy the same way again. The three humans left the platform and walked out of the chamber. Behind them, the council erupted into heated debate. Some species argued for immediate, overwhelming force. Others counseled caution. A few, the smaller and weaker species, said nothing but wondered if the humans might actually succeed. In his command seat, Vexthor watched the humans leave. He felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Doubt. These creatures were not behaving. Like any species he had encountered, they showed no fear, no willingness to negotiate, no recognition of their inferior position. Kermith approached his seat. "Overlord, what are your orders?" Vexthor thought for a long moment. "Authorize the Third Fleet to move on Earth, but tell them to be cautious. These humans may be more dangerous than they appear." "Primitives," Kermith said. "Dangerous primitives, perhaps, but primitives nonetheless." "Perhaps," Vexthor agreed. "Or perhaps we're about to learn why a species that fights itself for its entire history might be the most dangerous species in the galaxy." War Master Thulvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Dominance, and surveyed his fleet with satisfaction. 300 warships stretched out in formation around him, each one a masterpiece of Thalric's military engineering. The Third Fleet was considered one of the finest fighting forces in the galaxy, battle-tested and victorious in a dozen campaigns. Approaching the Sol system, his navigation officer reported, "Preparing to drop out of faster-than-light travel." Thulvar nodded, his scales gleaming under the bridge lights. This would be a short campaign. The humans had insulted the Council, and now they would learn the price of defiance. He expected minimal resistance. Perhaps a few orbital defense platforms that could be swept aside easily. The primitives might have stolen some intelligence and made bold claims, but intelligence didn't win battles. Power did, and the Third Fleet had more than enough power to pacify one small planet. "All ships, battle formation," he ordered. "Standard pacification pattern. We'll demonstrate our strength first. If they surrender immediately, we can avoid unnecessary destruction." The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Sensors immediately began scanning for threats, cataloging the system's layout. A yellow star, several rocky planets, gas giants in the outer system, and an extensive asteroid belt. "Sensor report," Thulvar demanded. The sensor officer, a younger Thalrix named Krell, studied his displays with confusion. "I'm reading the planet's War Master, but no defensive structures, no ships, no active power signatures, except for some civilian settlements on the third and fourth planets." "Nothing?" Thulvar moved to look at the sensor displays himself. "No orbital platforms? No defense fleet?" "Nothing military that I can detect," Krell confirmed. "It's like they evacuated their entire military." Another officer spoke up. "Perhaps they fled. Maybe their bold words in the Council were just bluster, and when faced with actual conflict, they ran." Thulvar considered this. It was possible. Many species talked bravely until they saw an actual war fleet. But something felt wrong. The humans had seemed too confident, too prepared. They had detailed intelligence on Council forces. Would such a species simply abandon their homeworld? "War Master, we're receiving a transmission from the third planet," the communications officer announced. "Audio only. Let me hear it." A human voice filled the bridge, speaking through the translation system. "Thalric's fleet, this is Earth Defense Command. You have entered human sovereign space without permission. You have 70 seconds to turn around and leave. This is your only warning." Several officers laughed. 70 seconds? The arrogance of these creatures was almost entertaining. "Send a response," Thulvar ordered. "Tell them that resistance is pointless. They will surrender or be destroyed." "War Master, they've cut the transmission," the communications officer reported. "No matter. Begin the advance. Standard approach to the third planet. Weapons ready, but hold fire unless they do something foolish." The fleet began moving deeper into the Sol system, maintaining their pacification formation. They passed the orbit of the fourth planet without incident. The asteroid belt loomed ahead. Millions of rocks drifting in their orbital paths. That's when everything changed. The asteroid belt came alive. What Thulvar had thought were rocks suddenly lit up with active power signatures. Thousands of them. Small craft, each no larger than a fighter, but there were so many. The sensors couldn't count them fast enough. Evasive action. Thulvar shouted. But it was already too late. The human ships erupted from their hiding places like a disturbed hive of insects. They moved in coordinated swarms, their patterns too precise, too fast for organic pilots. These were a eye-controlled craft with human oversight, something the Council considered both primitive and barbaric. But barbaric or not, they were devastatingly effective. Commander Dahan watched the battle unfold from her command. Centered deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid, holographic displays showed her the positions of every human fighter, every Thalrix ship, every projectile and energy beam. The display was overwhelming in its complexity, but the AI systems filtered and organized the information perfectly. All wings execute swarm pattern Delta, she commanded. Focus fire on their capital ships. Ignore the smaller vessels. The human fighters were built for one purpose: to deliver kinetic kill vehicles into enemy ships. Each fighter carried 12 projectiles, electromagnetically accelerated to a fraction of light speed before release. The Thalrix shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons, offered minimal protection against solid objects moving at relativistic velocities. The first wave of projectiles slammed into the Thalrix formation. Shields flared and failed. Hulls ruptured. Atmosphere vented into space. Ships that had patrolled the galaxy for centuries came apart like toys struck by hammers. Return fire. Thulvar roared. All weapons target those fighters. The Thalrix ships responded with their plasma cannons and particle beams. Space lit up with energy discharges, beautiful and deadly. But the human fighters were small and fast, constantly maneuvering in patterns that made targeting difficult. The AI systems predicted where the Thalrix weapons would fire and moved the fighters out of the way milliseconds before the beams arrived. For every human fighter destroyed, 10 Thalrix ships took critical damage. The mathematics of the battle were brutally simple. The Council had more firepower, but humans had more targets and better maneuverability. War Master, we're losing ships too quickly, Krell shouted over the chaos. Request permission to retreat? No. Thulvar slammed his fist on the command console. We outnumber them. We have superior firepower. We just need to adapt our tactics. But adaptation took time, and time was something the Thalrix didn't have. The human fighters pressed their advantage, swarming damaged ships to finish them off before moving to the next target. They showed no hesitation, no mercy, no fear. Because they felt no fear, the AIs didn't care about survival. They cared only about mission completion. A new wave of human weapons struck the fleet. These were different from the kinetic projectiles. Missiles that maneuvered independently, seeking out the most valuable targets. When they struck, they didn't just damage the ships. They detonated with the distinctive flash of nuclear explosions, pumping radiation that scrambled systems and killed crews, even inside shielded compartments. Radiation levels critical on decks 3 through 7, a damage control officer reported. We're losing crew to exposure? Thulvar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 30% of his fleet was already destroyed or crippled. The humans were using weapons the Council had banned as too cruel, too indiscriminate. Nuclear weapons in space combat created radiation hazards that lasted for years. No civilized species used them, but humans apparently didn't care about being civilized. They cared about winning. New contacts. The sensor officer screamed, launching from the 4th planet. Hundreds of them. More human ships, these ones larger than the fighters. Missile boats, each carrying dozens of antimatter-tipped warheads. They accelerated toward the Thalrix fleet, not even bothering to engage defensively. They just needed to get close enough to launch their payloads. Concentrate fire on those ships, Thulvar ordered. They're the real threat. The Thalrix fleet shifted its focus to the incoming missile boats. Their heavy weapons found targets, destroying the human ships in brilliant explosions. But even as they died, the missile boats launched their weapons. Antimatter warheads crossed the distance at speeds conventional weapons couldn't match. When antimatter touches normal matter, they annihilate each other in pure energy release. The explosions were small by stellar standards, but in the context of space combat, they were devastating. Thalric's ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in microseconds. On the Crimson Dominance, Thalvar made a decision he had never made in 3 centuries of military service. All ships retreat. Full speed back to the jump point. We need to regroup. But the human fighters anticipated the retreat. They swarmed the fleeing ships, targeting engines and faster-than-light drives. Ships that lost their drives were left stranded. Easy targets for the follow-up waves. Krell looked at his sensor display with horror. War Master, we've lost 70% of the fleet. 210 ships destroyed or disabled. We have less than 90 ships capable of faster-than-light travel. Then those 90 ships will carry word back to the Council, Tholvar said grimly. They need to know what we're facing. The Crimson Dominance was among the ships that escaped, though barely. Its hull was scarred by near misses, and several of its weapon systems were offline. As the ship prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Tholvar prepared a message for the Council. "This is War Master Tholvar of the Third Fleet," he recorded. "We engaged the human forces at their homeworld and suffered catastrophic losses. The enemy fights like nothing we have encountered before. They use weapons we consider barbaric without hesitation. Their tactics are designed not to achieve dominance but to inflict maximum casualties. They don't seek to win battles in the traditional sense. They seek annihilation." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The Council must understand. This is not a conventional species. This is not a normal war. The humans don't care about the rules of engagement. They don't care about proportional response. They will use any weapon, any tactic, any strategy to destroy us. If we want to defeat them, we cannot send a fleet. We must send everything." The message was transmitted, and the Crimson Dominance jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Sol system behind. In their wake, debris floated where proud warships had been. Human cleanup crews were already beginning salvage operations, collecting valuable materials and technology from the wrecks. On Earth, in a massive underground command center, Salman watched the aftermath of the battle on holographic displays. She was the chief engineer for Earth's military production, and her job was about to get much more intense. "They'll be back," said General Hansel, standing beside her. "And they'll bring more ships next time." "We know," Salman replied. "That's why we're not stopping. The von Neumann factories are already producing the next generation of fighters. By the time the Council returns, we'll have 3 times as many ships. Will it be enough?" Salman pulled up production projections on her display. Numbers scrolled past, calculations of resource extraction, manufacturing capacity, and exponential growth curves. "If we can maintain current production rates for another 3 months, we'll have enough ships to fight the entire Council fleet. If we get 6 months, we'll outnumber them. And if they come back sooner, then we fight with what we have," Salman said simply, "and we make them pay for every meter of space they take." The War Master was right about one thing. We're not trying to win a traditional war. We're making the cost of conquering Earth so high that eventually they'll decide we're not worth it. Hansel nodded slowly. "It's a gamble. We're betting that they'll break before we do." "It's not a gamble," Salman corrected. "They're fighting for dominance and pride. We're fighting for survival. They can lose battles and go home. We lose one battle and our species is enslaved. The side with more at stake always fights harder. Always has throughout human history. Across the solar system, human forces began preparing for the next phase. The first battle had been won, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. The Council wouldn't accept defeat from a primitive species. They would return with overwhelming force, determined to crush humanity's resistance. But humanity would be ready, because they had no choice but to be ready. Freedom or extinction. Those were the only options. And humanity had already decided which one they preferred in the depths of space. The von Neumann factories continued their work. Building, replicating, expanding. Each day brought more production capacity, more ships, more weapons. The exponential curve was humanity's greatest advantage and the Council's worst nightmare. The war had begun, and it would be like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The Council's response to the Third Fleet's destruction was swift and overwhelming. They assembled 15,000 warships from 6 different species. The Armada was the largest military force gathered in 10,000 years. Ships from the Thalrix Empire, the Krill Dominion, the Ventari Collective, and 3 other major powers all united under a single command structure. They were confident that sheer numbers would crush human resistance. Kermith himself took command of the fleet, his crystalline form pulsing with determination. He had studied the battle reports from Thalvar carefully. The humans used unconventional tactics and weapons, yes, but they were still a single species from a single system. Mathematics favored the Council overwhelmingly. 15,000 ships against perhaps a few thousand human vessels. The outcome seemed certain. But as the Council fleet began its advance toward human space, it discovered that humanity had no intention of fighting a traditional war. Captain Taiyun commanded the defense of the outer colonies, the small human settlements established on planets and moons throughout nearby systems. His orders were clear: do not engage in direct fleet battles. Strike where the enemy is weak, void where they are strong. The Council fleet entered the Proxima system, expecting to find a human colony to conquer, a foothold to use for staging their assault on Earth. Instead, they found nothing. The colony had been evacuated. The infrastructure had been stripped. Even the atmosphere processors had been removed. There was nothing left to capture. "They're running," one of the Krill commanders said with satisfaction. "They abandoned their positions before we arrive, or they're choosing their battles," Kermith replied cautiously. "Continue the advance, but maintain full defensive protocols." The fleet moved deeper into human-claimed space. Over the next 3 weeks, they captured 12 systems without firing a shot. Every location had been emptied of humans and valuable resources. It was frustrating but not concerning. Eventually, the humans would run out of places to retreat. Then the attacks began. Not the swarm tactics from the Sol system, but something more insidious. Small groups of human ships would appear from nowhere, strike at isolated sections of the fleet, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. They hit supply convoys, communication relays, scouting parties. Never in force. Never where the main fleet could respond. Always choosing targets where they had local superiority. Taiyang watched his tactical display from the BR edge of a human stealth ship hidden in a nebula. His fleet was smaller than the enemy's, far smaller, but he didn't need to win battles. He needed to make the Council's advance costly and slow. "Target confirmed," his tactical officer reported. Thalrix supply convoy. 6 freighters with 2 escort destroyers. Taiyang said, "Execute the attack." 20 human fighters dropped out of faster-than-light travel at point-blank range to the convoy. The escorts tried to respond, but the human ships were already firing. Kinetic projectiles ripped through the lightly armored freighters, destroying supplies the Council fleet desperately needed. The escorts were left intact, able to send distress signals and report the attack. By the time the Council response force arrived, Taiyang's ships were gone, jumped back into faster-than-light travel, and scattered across multiple vectors. Impossible to track, impossible to catch. This pattern repeated dozens of times each week. The Council fleet was bleeding resources, and they couldn't strike back. It was like fighting shadows. Admiral Borum, coordinated. Human operations across the entire theater of war from a mobile command ship that constantly changed location. She implemented what Earth strategists called the Scorched Galaxy Protocol. Any system the Council fleet approached found its resources already stripped or contaminated. Fuel depots were empty. Water sources were poisoned with compounds that required expensive purification. Mineral-rich asteroids were seeded with self-replicating. Mining drones that consumed everything and transmitted the materials back to human space via small automated ships. The Council fleet, designed to resupply from conquered territory, found there was nothing to resupply from. They had to bring everything they needed from home, stretching supply lines across dozens of light years. "This is unacceptable," Vexter complained during a Council meeting transmitted across space. "We have the largest fleet in galactic history, but we cannot catch these humans long enough to destroy them." They refuse to fight honorably, a Ventari commander added. They strike from ambush and flee. This is cowardice. This is effective, Kermith corrected. Honor is a luxury of the strong. The humans are the weaker force, so they fight as the weak must fight. With cunning and patience. Then we change tactics, Vexler declared. We divide our fleet. Smaller, faster groups that can respond more quickly to human attacks. That's exactly what they want, Kermith warned. Divided, we lose our advantage in numbers. They can concentrate force against isolated groups. We cannot continue like this, Vexler insisted. Our resources are being drained. Our crews are exhausted from constant alerts. Something must change. The Council fleet divided into smaller battle groups, each still numbering hundreds of ships. They would sweep through human space systematically. It's too large for humans to attack, too mobile to avoid. It was a sound strategy. It should have worked. But the Council made a critical error. They assumed human communication technology was limited by the same principles that governed their own systems. Scientist Junho had solved a problem that had frustrated Council researchers for millennia. Quantum entanglement communication allowed instant transmission of information across any distance. The catch was that it required paired particles prepared in advance, making it difficult to set up networks. But humans had been preparing this network for years. Ever since they first detected the Council, every human ship, every base, every settlement was connected by quantum communication. They could coordinate across the entire theater of war instantaneously. When a Council battle group moved, every human commander knew within seconds. When humans attacked one group, reinforcements from across the sector could coordinate their response. The Council still relied on one. Faster-than-light communication buoys, which meant messages took hours or days to reach their destinations. By the time a battle group called for help, the attack was long over. The technological asymmetry was devastating. Human forces always knew where the Council ships were. The Council had no idea where human forces would strike next. The war reached its turning point at Proxima Centauri. The Council committed a massive battle group of 3,000 ships to finally capturing the system and using it as a forward base for the assault on Sol. They expected the system to be empty like the others. Instead, they found General Yuna waiting with the largest human fleet yet assembled. 2,000 ships arranged in a defensive formation around the system's jump points. The Council had numerical superiority, but not by much. And this time, the humans weren't running. Finally, the Krill Admiral, commanding the Council forces, said with satisfaction, "They're going to stand and fight." Kermith, observing from the fleet flagship, felt uneasy. Why would the humans choose this system for a major battle? Why reveal their fleet strength now? But his warnings were ignored. The Council forces wanted a decisive battle. Now they had one. The battle began with a Council assault on the human defensive positions. Their ships advanced in traditional formation, shields at maximum, weapons charging. They expected the humans to meet them with kinetic weapons and missile attacks. Tactics they had learned to counter better than in the initial engagements. But the human ships didn't fire. They just waited as the Council fleet closed to optimal weapon range. Then they activated something the Council had never seen before. Every human ship was surrounded by a field that bent space itself, creating a gravitational lens effect. Energy weapons from the Council ships didn't strike their targets. Instead, the beams curved around the human vessels, bent by the artificial gravity wells. The shots that should have destroyed human ships passed harmlessly by. "What is this?" the Krill Admiral demanded. "Why aren't our weapons hitting?" His science officer studied the readings in shock. "They're using gravitational field manipulation. It's theoretical technology. We've researched it for centuries without success." "How did they develop it so quickly?" "Because we're not bound by your assumptions," Yuna transmitted on an open channel. "You've spent centuries trying to make it perfect. We just made it work. Now learn what happens when humans stop running and start fighting." The human fleet surged forward. Their kinetic weapons weren't affected by the gravity fields. At close range, they tore into the Council formation with devastating effect. Ships that had survived a dozen battles across the galaxy came apart like paper. The Council forces tried to adapt. They attempted to close to point-blank range where the gravity fields would be less effective. But the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They used the Council fleet's own size against it, forcing the larger ships to risk hitting each other if they fired. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Council had lost over 2,000 ships. The survivors retreated in chaos, their formations shattered, their command structure broken. Una surveyed the aftermath from her flagship's bridge. Human losses had been significant too. Nearly 800 ships destroyed, thousands of crew dead. But the victory was undeniable. For the first time, humans had met the Council in open battle and won decisively. News of the defeat spread across the Council faster than any official communication could travel. Merchant ships, neutral observers, even some species' own intelligence services reported the disaster. The implications were staggering. Smaller Council species began to question whether they wanted to continue the war. Why were they fighting to subjugate humans? Because the Thalrics and Krill wanted to maintain their dominance? Because the Council demanded unity? The costs were mounting while the benefits became less clear. 3 species formally withdrew their fleets from Council service, declaring neutrality in the conflict. 5 more threatened to do the same if the war continued. The monolithic unity that had governed the galaxy for millennia was fracturing in the Council chamber. Vexter stood before the assembled representatives and tried to maintain order. This is a temporary setback. We still have superior numbers. We still have superior resources. We need only commit fully to the effort. But a Venturi delegate challenged him. How many more ships must we lose? How many more crew members must die? And for what? To force one species to accept our authority? Is it worth the cost? It's about the principle, Vexter argued. If we allow humans to defy us, other species will follow. The order we've maintained will collapse. Perhaps that order deserves to collapse, a small alien said quietly. It was a representative from one of the minor species, one that had accepted protectorate status centuries ago. Perhaps the humans are right to fight. Perhaps we should have fought too. Chamber erupted in debate. For the first time in recorded history, the Council was seriously divided on a major issue. Species that had always followed the dominant powers were questioning the system. The human war had exposed cracks in the foundation of galactic civilization. On Earth, Haiyan-Wu received reports of the Council's internal conflicts with cautious optimism. We're winning the military war, he told his advisory council. But more importantly, we're winning the political war. We're proving that resistance is possible. That species don't have to accept subjugation. The Council will keep fighting, Giwan warned. They have too much pride to admit defeat. Let them fight, Haiyan-Wu replied. Every battle costs them more than it costs us. Our productio. N is still growing exponentially. Theirs is static. The mathematics favor us more each day. Minho pulled up projections. If current trends continue, we'll have numerical superiority in total ships within 4 months. Quality superiority we already have. Across the galaxy, the war continued. But everyone could see which way the tide was flowing. The species that had ruled for millions of years was being challenged by newcomers who refused to accept the old order. And slowly, inevitably, the old order was breaking. One standard year, after Haiyan-Wu declared war in the Council chamber, that same chamber stood empty and silent. The crystal structure still floated in neutral space, but no representatives gathered there. The Galactic Council had dissolved 3 months earlier when enough species withdrew that a quorum could no longer be achieved. The institution that had governed the galaxy for millions of years had collapsed. The Thalrics Empire was a shadow of its former glory. Their fleets had been destroyed or scattered. Their economy was in ruins from the cost of the war. Their subject species, seeing weakness, had demanded independence, and the Thalrics lacked the strength to refuse. The Empire had fragmented into dozens of smaller states, each claiming to be the true successor of Thalric's power. The other major council species had suffered similar fates. The Krill Dominion faced civil war, The Ventari collective had retreated to their core worlds and closed their borders. The galaxy that had been united under council rule was now a collection of independent powers, each pursuing their own interests. But the story wasn't over. It was transforming into something new. Han Wu walked through the same corridor he had walked a year before. This time he wasn't approaching as a supplicant seeking terms. He was walking as an equal, perhaps more than an equal, to meet with representatives from 43 species who had requested a gathering. The chamber had been reconfigured. The hierarchical seating arrangement was gone, replaced by a circular design where every seat was at the same level. No species above others. No dominance through positioning. G1 walked beside him, no longer in military uniform, but in diplomatic attire. The war was over, at least the active fighting phase. Now came the harder work of building something to replace what had fallen as they entered the chamber. Han Wu saw that most of the seats were already filled. He recognized many species from the old council sessions, but they looked different now. Less arrogant. More uncertain. They'd seen the old order fall and didn't know what would replace it. A Ventari representative approached, his metallic feathers rustling nervously. Ambassador Han Wu, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We know humanity has little reason to trust those of us who serve the council. We understand the position you were in, Han Wu replied carefully. Most species didn't choose subjugation. They were forced into it, just like the council tried to force us. We're not here to judge. We're here to discuss the future. Ventari seemed relieved. That's what we hope to hear. We want to discuss what you proposed before the war began. The Democratic Federation of Sapient Species. Is that offer still available? Han Wu gestured to the chamber. That's why we're here. Please, let's begin. The representatives took their seats. Han Wu noted that some of the old council's major powers were absent. The Thalrics had been invited but refused to attend. Some of the former military powers were too proud to sit as equals with species they had once dominated. That was fine. The Federation would proceed without them. Myth activated a holographic display at the chamber's center. It showed the basic principles of the proposed Federation. Voluntary membership. Equal voting rights regardless of military or economic power. Collective defense against external aggression. Free trade and cultural exchange. Restrictions on internal conflict between members. This is fundamentally different from the council system, Minho explained. The council was based on dominance. The strong protected the weak, and in return, the weak surrendered their autonomy. The Federation is based on cooperation. We protect each other because we're stronger together than apart. A small alien from a species Han Wu didn't recognize raised a tentacle. What prevents the strong from dominating within this system? Humans have proven their military power. What stops you from becoming the new council? It was a fair question, and Han Wu had expected it. Constitutional limits, he answered. The Federation Charter includes specific provisions against any single species gaining too much power. No species can hold more than one key position in the government. Military forces remain under individual species control, not Federation command except when specifically authorized for defensive operations. And most importantly, any species can leave the Federation at any time. We're not building a prison. We're building a partnership. And if a species leaves and then attacks Federation members, asked a Krill delegate, one of the few from that species who had broken with their government. Then they face the combined defensive capabilities of all member species, Giwan responded. That's the deterrent. Individually, some species might be vulnerable. Together, we're strong enough that attacking any member becomes strategically foolish. The discussion continued for hours. Questions about trade regulations, military coordination, dispute resolution, technology sharing, every concern was addressed carefully. The humans had prepared for this meeting extensively. Knowing that their credibility depended on creating a system that actually worked, finally, one of the Ventari elders asked the question everyone had been thinking. Why are you doing this? You won the war. You could dictate terms. You could become the dominant power. Why offer equality instead? Han Wu stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Because we remember our history. On Earth, we had empires. We had conquerors who dominated others. We had systems where the strong ruled the weak, and every single one of those systems eventually fell. Some collapsed from internal rebellion. Others destroyed themselves through endless wars. None of them lasted. He gestured to the assembled aliens. We learned that cooperation lasts longer than domination. We learned that equals work harder and smarter than subjects. We learned that diversity of thought and culture makes civilization stronger, not weaker. It took us thousands of years and countless wars to learn these lessons. We're offering you the benefit of that experience. And there's a practical reason too, Haiyan continued. We're one species from one system. Even with our technology, we're limited. But imagine what we could achieve together. Human innovation combined with Ventari engineering, Krill biological expertise combined with our medical knowledge, every species has strengths. Together, we could accomplish things no single species could dream of. The chamber was quiet as the representatives considered his words. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to nod or make their species equivalent gesture of agreement. The Ventari elder spoke again. We will need to consult with our governments, but I believe the collective will join this federation. We have seen enough of dominance. Let us try cooperation. Over the next week, 28 species formally signed the Federation Charter. It wasn't everyone who had been invited, and it was a tiny fraction of the hundreds of species in the galaxy. But it was a beginning. Minho established the first Federation research cooperative on a neutral space station. Scientists from a dozen species gathered to share knowledge freely. The humans taught rapid prototyping techniques and showed how they had advanced so quickly. In return, they learned about exotic physics from species that had been studying the universe for millions of years. The first collaborative project was a new type of faster-than-light drive that combined human efficiency with Ventari stability. The prototype was 3 times faster than either species could have built alone. Salmon converted the von Neumann factories from military to civilian production. The exponential manufacturing capacity that had won the war was now directed toward reconstruction. Shipyards to build trading vessels. Stations to serve as meeting points. Tools and materials to help species rebuild from the war's devastation. She coordinated with engineers from other species. They quickly realized how much they could learn from each other. The humans had developed manufacturing processes that were crude but incredibly efficient. The other species had refinement and precision. Combined, they created production systems better than either could achieve alone. But not everyone was happy with the new order. The remnants of the Thalrix Empire watched the Federation's growth with bitterness and anger. In their minds, they had been the galaxy's rightful leaders, brought low by primitive upstarts. Some Thalrix warlords began gathering forces, planning for the day they could reclaim their dominance. Haiyan received intelligence reports about these activities, but didn't overreact. They're allowed to be angry, he told his advisors. They're allowed to refuse to join us. What they're not allowed to do is attack Federation members. As long as they stay in their own space, we leave them alone. And if they don't stay in their own space, Guan asked, then the Federation responds as specified in the Charter. Collective defense. But we don't strike first. We don't become the aggressors. That's how we avoid becoming what we fought against. 6 months after the Federation's founding, a Thalrix warlord tested the new alliance. He attacked a small Ventari colony on the edge of Federation space, expecting the alliance to fracture when actually tested. Different species would prioritize their own interests, he believed. Unity was an illusion. He was wrong. The Federation response was immediate and overwhelming. Human ships arrived within hours, followed by Ventari reinforcements and vessels from 3 other species. They didn't just drive off the attackers. They pursued them back to the warlord's base and demanded his surrender. Faced with unified opposition, the warlord's fleet scattered. The Federation forces secured the colony, helped with reconstruction, and sent a clear message to anyone else considering testing them: the alliance was real. And attacking any member meant facing all members. After that, the attack stopped. Species that had been considering aggressive expansion reconsidered. The Federation might be new and idealistic, but it had teeth. A year and a half after the war's end, Haiyanwu and Taiyang stood in Earth's orbital station, watching construction crews assemble a new type of vessel. It wasn't a warship, though it had defensive capabilities. It was an exploration ship. It's designed to push beyond known space into unexplored regions of the galaxy. The crew would be mixed species. Humans would work alongside Ventari, Krill, and others. They would explore together, discover together, face the unknown together. Do you think we'll find more threats out there? Taiyang asked, watching the ship take shape. Haiyanwu considered the question. Probably. The galaxy is vast. There are likely species we haven't encountered yet. Some might be friendly, others might be hostile. But that's why we need the Federation. We don't know what's out there, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. It's strange, Taiyang said. A year ago, we were fighting for survival. Now we're planning exploration missions. That's how it should be, Haiyanwu replied. War should be the exception, not the rule. We fought because we had to. Now that we don't have to, we can focus on what really matters. Growth, discovery, building something better. On dozens of worlds across the Federation, similar conversations were happening. Species that had spent millennia under Council dominance were experiencing freedom for the first time. It wasn't always easy. Freedom meant responsibility. It meant making decisions instead of following orders. Some struggled with it, but most embraced it. Trade flourished as species no longer needed Council approval to exchange goods. Art and culture mixed as different civilizations shared their perspectives. Scientific advancement accelerated as researchers collaborated instead of competing. The old Council species watched these developments with mixed feelings. Some regretted not joining the Federation sooner. Others clung to their pride, insisting that the old ways were better. A few continued plotting to restore their power, but with each passing month, that seemed less likely. In the old Council chamber, now reconfigured as the Federation Assembly, representatives gathered for a regular session. The agenda included trade disputes, research funding allocations, and planning for new exploration missions. Routine governance. The kind that didn't make dramatic stories but was essential to keeping civilization functioning. Haiyanwu sat in his designated seat, equal in status to every other representative. He watched the debate about mineral rights in a newly discovered asteroid belt and marveled at how normal it seemed. A year ago, they had been at war. Now, they were arguing about mining regulations. Is this what you hoped for? Asked the Ventari elder sitting next to him. When you declared war on the Council, did you imagine this? Haiyanwu thought back to that moment, standing in the original chamber, saying words he knew would change everything. I imagined survival. I imagined freedom. I imagined that we would fight until we won or died. But this, he gestured to the chamber, this is better than I imagined. We're not just surviving, we're building something new. Something that might actually last. The session continued. Somewhere in the galaxy, the first Federation exploration ship prepared for its maiden voyage. On Earth, factories produced goods for trade with a dozen different species. In laboratories across multiple worlds, scientists collaborated on projects that would have been impossible alone. The old galaxy was gone, destroyed by its own rigidity and refusal to change. But from its ashes, something new was growing. A civilization based on choice instead of force, on cooperation instead of domination, on the idea that different species could work together as equals. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still species that refused to join. The Thalrics and their allies remained hostile, lurking in their own space and planning revenge. Other threats surely existed in the unexplored regions of the galaxy, but for the first time in galactic history, hundreds of species had chosen to stand together not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. They had seen the alternative. They had chosen a better path. Haiyanwu stood and made his way to the observation window that overlooked the station. Ships from a dozen different species docked and departed. Traders, diplomats, scientists, explorers, all working toward their own goals but connected by the Federation's principles. Taeyang joined him at the window. They're saying on Earth that you're going to be remembered as the human who changed the galaxy? Hyenwu shook his head. I'm just the person who refused to kneel. The galaxy changed because everyone else chose to stand up to. That's the real story. Not that humanity won a war, but that hundreds of species decided they deserved freedom. And what happens now? Taeyang asked. Hyenwu smiled. Now we find out what free species can accomplish together. We explore, we discover, build. We probably face new challenges and new threats. But whatever comes next, we face it together. Not as subjects and rulers. Not as strong and weak, but as equals. As partners. He looked out at the ships and the stars beyond. That's what we fought for. Not to rule. Not to conquer. But to create a galaxy where every species has the right to determine its own destiny. Where cooperation is valued more than domination. Where the future is built together, not imposed by the strong on the weak. And if someone tries to take that away, then we remind them what happens when you threaten free beings, Hyenwu said quietly. We showed the council. We'll show anyone else who needs the lesson. Freedom is worth fighting for. It's worth any sacrifice. And those who would take it from others should remember one thing about humans and our allies. What's that? We don't kneel. Not anymore. Not ever again. And neither does anyone else who stands with us. Far from the Federation's core, the exploration ship completed its final checks and prepared to jump into unknown space. Its mixed-species crew worked together with the easy familiarity of those who trusted each other. They carried with them the Federation's principles and humanity's stubborn refusal to accept limitations. They would explore unknown regions. They would encounter new species, some friendly and some hostile. They would face challenges that required the combined knowledge of multiple civilizations to overcome. And through it all, it would prove that the Federation was more than just words on a charter. It was a new way for species to exist together. A way based on mutual respect, shared goals, and the understanding that cooperation made everyone stronger. The ship jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared into the unknown. Behind it, the Federation continued growing, adding new members, facing new challenges. Building a future that no single species could have created alone. The galaxy had changed. The old order was gone, replaced by something uncertain, but full of possibility. And at the heart of that change was a simple truth that humanity had learned through millennia of conflict, and had taught the galaxy through a year of war. Freedom is not given. It is taken, and once taken, it must be defended. But when free beings choose to stand together, they become strong enough that no force in the galaxy can make them kneel. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not technology or tactics or weapons, but the understanding that every being deserves the right to choose its own path, and the knowledge that those who defend that right together cannot be defeated. The new galaxy was just beginning, and it would be built by equals, working together toward a future they would create through choice, not submission. That was the real victory. Not the battles won, but the future earned.